At the extravagant intergalactic peace banquet aboard the starliner Excellius, Jack, a seasoned human explorer, awkwardly fumbled through the crowd of towering, strange alien dignitaries. The space station glittered with iridescent lights, reflecting off the polished chrome walls. It was a prime opportunity to forge diplomatic ties between Earth and several powerful galactic factions, but Jack was focused on one thing: surviving the night without offending anyone. As he walked past an alien dignitary, he stumbled over his own feet, sending a tray of suspiciously glowing drinks flying into the air. The drinks spilled over an official's robes, and Jack, in his panic, tried to apologize by flapping his arms like a bird, only to knock a vase off a table. "Smooth," he muttered to himself, trying to salvage the situation. "Do not worry, human," an alien with tentacles for arms chuckled in an accent that sounded suspiciously like it was made from bubbles. "It happens." Jack grinned, sheepishly, and tried to salvage a bit of his dignity by switching to the food table. There, a half-eaten plate of what looked like glowing jellyfish caught his eye. He immediately grabbed a handful, not caring what alien species it was native to. He needed something to eat. That's when he saw her, Princess Zara, the royal figure who had been overseeing the peace negotiations with her species, the Zorathians. Zara stood near a balcony, exuding an aura of elegance and stoic grace. She wasn't like the other guests. While most of the diplomats had exchanged pleasantries, Zara remained apart, scanning the room with a sharp gaze. Her long, translucent tentacles cascaded down, shimmering in the light, and her cerulean skin was almost luminescent. The way she carried herself was regal, yet Jack noticed a subtle tension in her posture. She looked like someone who had seen too many boring diplomatic dinners. Jack, with no real sense of self-preservation, stumbled toward her. He didn't know why, but he felt an overwhelming urge to speak with her, something about her presence pulling him in. "Hello there," he said, awkwardly clearing his throat. "Nice party." Zara looked down at him, her gaze unfazed. "Do you always introduce yourself with such subtlety?" she replied, her voice a mix of amusement and curiosity. Jack felt a slight flush creep up his neck. "Well, I try to keep it low-key. Not into the whole formal thing. Too many protocols and, well, I'm just here for the snacks." He gestured to the table of glowing jellyfish with an exaggerated shrug. Zara raised an eyebrow. "A human diplomat who doesn't care about diplomacy?" Jack shrugged, a half-grin tugging at his lips. "Diplomacy's great and all, but I'd rather just talk to people and, figure things out. Plus, I'm more of a let's drink and figure it out kinda guy." Zara couldn't help but chuckle. It was the first genuine laugh she'd had all night. The other guests had been too stiff, too formal, and far too concerned with getting everything perfect for the treaty. But this human, this messy, unpolished creature, was refreshingly honest. "You humans are interesting," she said, taking a slow step closer. "Most find diplomacy tiresome, but you seem to thrive in chaos." "Yeah, well," Jack replied with a wink. "Chaos is kind of my thing." For the next hour, the conversation flowed freely, fueled by more drinks and Jack's unfiltered charm. Zara found herself genuinely intrigued, her earlier aloofness melting into something warmer. Jack had no grand diplomatic ambitions. He wasn't trying to convince her to join Earth's side in the peace talks or win any favor. He was just there, talking to her like a person, something no one had bothered to do since she'd arrived. Jack regaled Zara with exaggerated tales of Earth's history, focusing on absurd human inventions like the wheel and the microwave, which Zara took as a sign of deep human ingenuity. Her stiff, royal demeanor slipped further as they shared their first laugh over Jack's description of Earth's fashion. "Spandex. It's like a second skin." "Why?" "Who knows? Fashion's a mess." By the time the banquet started to wind down, Jack and Zara had found a comfortable rhythm. She no longer seemed like the regal alien princess trying to hold the room together, and Jack wasn't the bumbling human trying to stay out of trouble. There was a sort of electric tension between them, fueled by their shared absurdity and Jack's complete lack of fear. At some point, the lights dimmed, and the conversation took a shift. Zara, sensing the intimate atmosphere, leaned in closer. So tell me, human, she asked, her voice low and sultry. What exactly do you think of this diplomatic mission? Jack, who was now a few drinks deep, took it as an invitation to respond in kind. I think it's great. It's like one of those really boring family reunions, except the food's better, and no one expects you to be anyone other than you. Her eyes glinted mischievously. Then let's make it more interesting, Zara suggested, before taking his hand and pulling him away from the crowd. They passed through a long corridor filled with exotic alien flora. Despite his usual self-awareness, Jack found himself more intrigued than cautious. Something about Zara's presence, the way she commanded space, had a magnetic pull. He was in over his head, but the fun was too tempting to resist. They stumbled into a private room, and as soon as the door shut behind them, Jack's bravado started to falter. He'd never been this forward with someone of Zara's stature, never expected to end up alone with a princess, especially not one who was out of his league in every sense. But Zara didn't give him time to think. Before he could even register the shift, Zara had pulled him in for a kiss. And then everything blurred. The kiss was electric, charging through him like a bolt of energy. Her tentacles wrapped around him, and Jack instinctively responded, hands moving over her alien body. It was awkward, clumsy even. He was a human, after all, and had no idea how to navigate the alien intricacies of Zara's anatomy. But somehow it worked. Her laughter, soft and unexpected, vibrated against his lips, and that sound only pushed him further. They tore at each other's clothing, Zara's intricate alien dress coming apart with ease, while Jack's own attire became an increasingly tangled mess. The entire encounter felt absurd, but in the best possible way. As the night went on, their passion was anything but graceful, but that's what made it fun. Jack's hands were everywhere, where they should and shouldn't be, but Zara seemed to encourage every move. There was no awkwardness, no hesitations. Just a mix of drunken spontaneity and mutual curiosity. They both laughed at their absurdity, at how ridiculous everything felt, but still, they couldn't stop. A mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration washed over them, and they finally collapsed, tangled in the alien silk sheets, bodies pressed together in a haphazard heap. The last thought Jack had as sleep overtook him was how strange and amazing this night had been. A human, completely out of his element, was wrapped up in the arms of an alien princess. He'd never expected peace talks to end this way. The morning after was a blur of half-remembered moments, but Jack woke up with one thing clear: he had absolutely no idea how he had ended up in Zara's bed. The alien princess, whose royal composure had been nothing short of terrifying the previous evening, now lay beside him, her cerulean skin shimmering in the light streaming through the window. The sheets, made of some alien silk material, clung to him in the most uncomfortable way imaginable. Groggily, Jack tried to move but got tangled in the strange alien fabric. He was just about to extricate himself when he heard Zara stir. A low murmur escaped her lips, and her tentacles twitched in her sleep. Jack froze, his body suddenly on high alert. What had happened last night? Was it really all a crazy mistake, or had he somehow pulled off a miracle? He gingerly shifted his weight, trying not to disturb Zara, and began working his way out of the bed. His bare foot met a strange squishy texture on the floor, which was probably the equivalent of an alien rug. He winced as he stepped on something cold and wet, probably some kind of beverage from the banquet. Trying to suppress a curse, Jack continued moving, his mind racing through 1,000 potential escape plans. Just as he reached for his pants, Zara shifted beside him, her voice breaking through his escape fantasy. "Human," she murmured, still with a touch of slumber in her voice. "You're not going anywhere." Jack froze, a chill running down his spine. This was bad. Real bad. He didn't know if he had actually gotten into a diplomatic incident last night, but now it looked like he had somehow become entangled in a whole new kind of mess. Zara's voice grew more alert, her tone carrying a sudden urgency. "Human, are you still here?" Jack let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, I'm still here." Zara sat up, blinking, and the sheets fell from her shoulders, revealing her unique alien anatomy, smooth, blue skin, and long, delicate tentacles wrapped around her waist. She seemed unaware of the fact that Jack had just had the most intimate night of his life with her. It took her a few moments, but suddenly, her eyes widened. Wait! What did we? Her gaze darted to his face, and then she looked down, almost as though scanning her body for something. Jack's stomach dropped as he realized where this was headed. Zara's eyes narrowed, and he could see the horror in them as realization dawned. Oh no! She breathed. Oh no, no, no! Her tentacles twitched frantically, and Jack immediately stepped back. Hey, wait, what's going on? What's wrong? Zara's voice was full of disbelief. You did it, didn't you? She stood up, her posture rigid with tension. You humans are always so reckless. You've ruined everything. Jack blinked, still in a daze. What are you talking about? You have no idea, do you? Zara's voice was rising now. I'm pregnant, she exclaimed, pointing at her abdomen with one of her tentacles, as though he should understand the significance of this. Jack's mind tried to process what she was saying, but it was like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Wait, what? Pregnant? I didn't, how could I? He stammered, backing away. This was definitely not in his diplomatic handbook. You're pregnant from last night? His brain still couldn't wrap itself around it. Zara was pacing now, her voice getting more frantic. You don't understand. For my people, this is impossible. We reproduce only through highly controlled scientific means. There is no room for spontaneous accidents like this. Jack's mind raced. Wait, so this isn't normal for your species? Normal? Zara's voice was sharp now, laced with irritation. It's taboo. This is a catastrophe. I should never have, but you humans, with your spontaneous ways. You make everything so complicated. Jack held up his hands, desperate for a little clarity. Okay, I get it. You're not happy about this. But hey, it's not my fault. We just had a few drinks and, well, I guess I got carried away. Who could blame me, right? He said, trying to make light of it. But Zara was having none of it. Her tentacles were flailing wildly now, the tips glowing in a warning sign. You think this is funny? You think I'm going to just let this slide? She started pacing again, her voice rising with each step. You humans are all the same. You think you can come into our territory, seduce us, and then run away when things get complicated? Jack's eyes widened. Run away? Who's running away? I'm right here. I'm not the one freaking out. He shot back, starting to panic. Look, I wasn't even planning on this. I mean, I've never had to deal with alien pregnancy before. This is new for me. Zara, however, wasn't in the mood for logic. You need to fix this. I'm going to find you, human, and when I do, you'll answer for your reckless actions, she yelled, now fully pissed off. Jack's mind raced as he tried to figure out what to do. He had no idea how to fix this. But as Zara stormed out of the room, determination flashing in her eyes, Jack sighed in defeat. She wasn't going to let this go. Not in a million years. That's when the panic truly set in. There was no way he was going to face her wrath. He had to escape. His mind was scrambling, thinking of a million different plans, dodging her, lying about his species' reproductive practices, anything to avoid a confrontation. His hand hovered over the door, ready to bolt, but then, in the midst of all the chaos, an idea struck him. I could just talk my way out of this. Jack quickly grabbed his clothes, throwing them on with exaggerated speed, his brain still catching up with his body's frantic movements. It was going to take some quick thinking and a lot of charm to talk his way out of this one. As he moved toward the door, Jack couldn't help but wonder if he had just gotten himself into the most absurd mess of his entire life. Jack wasn't sure what the hell had just happened, but he knew one thing: he needed a plan. A quick one. Zara's frantic pace as she stormed through the corridors left him with little room to breathe, let alone think straight. The princess was furious, no, livid. And the more he tried to calm the situation, the worse it got. There was no getting around it now. Jack had somehow triggered a planetary-level crisis with his impromptu rendezvous. He didn't have the faintest clue about alien reproductive practices, but he wasn't about to let this misunderstanding cost him his life. His first instinct was to run. But then, reality hit him like a cold shower. Running was probably the worst idea. If Zara wanted to chase him, she could. After all, she had all the resources of her species at her disposal. He could already imagine her, a vengeful alien princess, hunting him down like a bounty hunter. He had to come up with a plan that would buy him some time. Time to think, time to get ahead of the situation. Think, Jack muttered under his breath, pacing back and forth in his quarters. He was still processing the absurdity of it all. Pregnant? Her species didn't even reproduce naturally, and yet he'd somehow found himself in the middle of their most forbidden taboo. Suddenly, a brilliant idea struck him. Well, it wasn't so much brilliant as it was a desperate attempt at salvaging the situation with humor. Jack grinned, realizing that if there was one thing he could do well, it was talk his way out of trouble, especially if he could make people laugh. He needed to confuse Zara. If he could get her to laugh, to feel like this was all just a joke, maybe, just maybe, he could buy himself enough time to figure out a real solution. And that meant finding a way to twist the narrative in his favor. So, what if I tell her it's a cultural thing, Jack thought. I could claim humans are a unique species, and spontaneous pregnancy is a natural occurrence for us. It's not just sex, it's destiny. Yeah, it was a stretch, but it could work, if he sold it right. With a sigh, Jack grabbed his communicator. It was time to take a step into damage control mode. He had to reach her before she did something drastic, like contacting her entire fleet to put a bounty on his head. Zara, listen! Jack's voice was calm but firm as he initiated the call. The screen buzzed, flickering before Zara's furious face appeared. Wait, hold up. I've got this under control. Under control? Zara's voice was seething with barely contained rage. You think you can just fix this? You disgusting human! You've ruined everything! Jack cringed but stayed calm. Hey, I'm not trying to ruin your life here. I promise. It's just, complicated. He held up his hands in what he hoped was a non-threatening gesture. Look, in my culture, spontaneous pregnancies are, well, they're a thing. It's kind of a rare occurrence, but sometimes it just happens. He forced a laugh, trying to sound as if he was in on some cosmic joke. You can think of it like destiny. Like fate or whatever. Zara looked absolutely confused. Destiny? Fate? Her voice dropped into something more wary. What are you talking about? Well, you see, in human culture sometimes, how do I put this? We get pregnant after an intimate encounter. It's not exactly planned, but it's not uncommon either. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea if she was buying this, but he had to keep going. We call it the human condition. He made up that term on the spot. But the way Zara looked at him suggested she was waiting for a deeper explanation. It's just that when humans, engage in passion, sometimes it results in, well, a little surprise. Zara's tentacles twitched. Her expression shifted from rage to confusion, then back to suspicion. So you're saying, what? You humans get pregnant spontaneously? Without even trying? Jack nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. You catch on quickly. It's like, I dunno, a blessing maybe. And honestly, I think it's kind of beautiful. The unexpected arrival of new life. It's like the universe is giving you a second chance at everything. I mean, sure, it's a bit inconvenient, but it's totally worth it. Zara stared at him as if he just explained quantum mechanics in an alien language. This is how your species operates. Yeah, but it's totally cool. It's like our thing, Jack said, trying to sound reassuring. I'm not saying it's always ideal, but hey, if you're into surprises, humanity is the place to be. Zara was still processing, but Jack could see the wheels turning in her mind. He needed to keep the pressure on. You see, the thing is, this isn't a problem. In fact, it's fate. You and I are, well, destined to be connected in a way that no one expected. And that's something special, right? He was trying to get her on his side, hoping she'd buy into his chaotic mess of a reasoning. Zara blinked a few times, then crossed her arms. Her voice was calmer now, although still tinged with uncertainty. So, this pregnancy thing? It's not unusual for humans to, just get pregnant like this? Jack raised an eyebrow. Nope. Totally normal. Just part of the deal. In fact, I think you're lucky. Not every human gets to experience this level of cosmic connection. He smirked, even though his heart was hammering. It's a once-in-a-lifetime type of thing, really. Zara looked at him in silence for a long moment, then shook her head slowly. So you're telling me, we were just meant to? Jack nodded with a forced grin. Exactly. Meant to be, baby. This whole thing was written in the stars. Zara didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or strangle him. She chose, instead, to stare at him in complete silence, her mind undoubtedly trying to process the absurdity of it all. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice quiet, almost resigned. You really believe that, don't you? Jack gave her his most charming grin. Absolutely. And honestly, Zara, I think this is going to work out just fine. So, why don't we take a step back, take a deep breath, and figure this out together? Zara remained still, clearly skeptical, but Jack could sense her hesitation. The tension had lightened, if only a little. He had bought himself some time. And maybe, just maybe, his ridiculous plan had worked. For now, anyway. Jack didn't know whether to laugh or scream when he saw Zara's confused expression slowly start to shift. At first, she seemed utterly disbelieving, almost ready to explode with indignation. But as Jack continued spinning his wild explanation of human destiny and spontaneous pregnancies, something started to crack in her icy composure. Maybe it was his genuine, albeit desperate, attempt to make sense of the absurd situation, or maybe it was his ridiculous charm. Either way, Zara's wariness seemed to loosen, replaced by a slowly dawning skepticism. So let me get this straight, she said, her voice now tinged with a hint of disbelief. You humans just get pregnant? No planning, no science? Just surprise? Exactly, Jack said, nodding with exaggerated enthusiasm. It's not just a thing, it's practically an art form. Think of it as cosmic spontaneity. It's in our DNA. You can't plan for it. You just let it happen. It's how the universe tells you, hey, it's time for a little chaos in your life. He threw up his hands for dramatic effect, hoping she would see the humor in it. Zara's tentacles quivered. Jack wasn't sure if it was frustration or curiosity, but the look on her face said she was teetering somewhere in between. Her mind was clearly processing, weighing this ridiculous explanation. Jack had thrown a lot at her, and now all he could do was wait and pray she didn't come to her senses and start throwing him into a dungeon. I mean, it's not as bad as it sounds, right? Jack continued, leaning in slightly. You and I, this cosmic link we've got, can be an amazing thing. Think of it as fate giving us a second chance. I'm sure we'll figure it out. No big deal. Zara stared at him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing. Her usual regal air had been replaced by something else now, something that looked almost human. Jack's mind raced. Could it be that she was starting to buy it? Or was she just humoring him before she locked him up in some alien prison? You really believe that, don't you? Zara said, her tone softer, but still cautious. Well, yeah. Why not? Jack replied, putting on a grin. Life's too short to worry about the little details, right? You gotta just roll with it. Embrace the chaos, as we say back home. Zara's expression flickered for a moment, something like a mix of incredulity and reluctant amusement. Jack was on a tightrope, But he had a sense that the tension in her posture was less angry now, more like she was trying to wrap her mind around his words. Her eyes softened ever so slightly, and Jack dared to press on. "And hey, if it helps, I'm sure we'll be great parents," he said, his voice light and teasing. "You know, with your royal status and my, charm, we could raise a very powerful little chaos demon." Zara blinked, her lips twitching in what might have been a smile, or a grimace. Jack wasn't sure. She didn't say anything for a while, and Jack let the silence stretch, hoping she was beginning to understand the absurdity of it all in a new light. Finally Zara spoke. "I'm not sure I should be taking advice from someone who doesn't even understand their own species' reproductive system," she said with a hint of dry humor. Jack chuckled. "Hey, I'm not a biologist. But I do know how to handle a little chaos," he quipped, trying to keep the mood light. "And if this is the universe's way of telling us we're meant to be together, who am I to argue with fate, right?" Zara sighed, rubbing her temple with a tentacle. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. But her voice had softened. The anger, the outrage, it was all dissipating, and Jack was certain now. He had somehow managed to buy himself a bit of time, and more importantly, he had defused the immediate threat. "So, what now?" Jack asked, his voice casual but hopeful. Zara paused, her eyes narrowing again as she thought it over. "Now we go see the High Council," she said, her tone turning more serious. "You need to explain this human pregnancy thing to them, and I need to figure out how we, can explain this to my people without the entire galaxy laughing at us." Her words were laced with frustration, but her stance had loosened somewhat. She was still a princess, still bound by her responsibilities, but there was a flicker of something more human in her demeanor. Jack's grin widened. "I can't wait to meet them. Do you think they'll be as charmed by my human condition as you were?" he asked with a wink, not sure whether he was still being serious or just enjoying the chaos he'd somehow turned into his best asset. Zara gave him a look, half exasperation, half amusement, as she turned toward the door. "If you don't stop making jokes, I will have you thrown into the royal dungeons." She paused. "Then again, you might charm your way out of that too." There was something almost affectionate in the way she said it, though Jack wasn't sure if he was imagining it. "Well, I'll try to keep the jokes to a minimum," Jack said, smiling as he followed her. "But no promises. I've got to keep the mood light, right?" Zara didn't respond, but the slightest smirk curled on her lips. Maybe, just maybe, Jack had done the impossible. He had turned a diplomatic disaster into the beginning of an absurdly funny, wildly unpredictable adventure. The fate of a whole species and a royal lineage rested on his ability to talk his way out of anything, and with his usual luck, he might just pull it off. The corridor stretched ahead of them, and Jack couldn't help but feel a strange sense of optimism. If he could get through the High Council, maybe, just maybe, he could make Zara see that this wasn't such a disaster after all. Besides, with his charm, quick thinking, and a bit of humor, he could probably talk his way out of anything, right? As they walked side by side, Jack couldn't help but feel a little surge of pride. Maybe, just maybe, he'd turn this cosmic mess into an opportunity for something better. Something far more entertaining.